Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. Tala stood alone on the observation deck, her opalescent skin reflecting the distant stars. The diplomatic vessel, Harmony, drifted silently through the void, carrying representatives of 27 species to the Galactic Council's centennial assembly. As the sole luminary aboard, Tala felt the familiar weight of isolation pressing down upon her shoulders. The luminari were renowned across the galaxy for their emotional detachment, a trait that made them exceptional mediators but deeply isolated as individuals. Their homeworld, Lux, orbited a dying star, and over millennia of evolution, they had developed the ability to convert emotional energy into light. Strong emotions caused their skin to glow with blinding intensity, a biological response that their society had come to view as dangerous and primitive. "Ambassador Tala, your presence is requested in Conference Room 3, announced the ship's communication system. She turned away from the viewport, her face perfectly composed despite the turmoil within. The Luminary Council had sent her with explicit instructions: secure mining rights on the frontier worlds or face exile. Her people's resources were depleting rapidly, and without new energy sources, their civilization would collapse within a generation. What the Council didn't know, what no one knew, was that Tala carried a genetic anomaly. Unlike other Luminari, who had evolved to suppress their emotional responses, she felt everything with searing intensity. Each emotion burned through her like plasma, requiring constant, exhausting control to prevent her skin from betraying her with its telltale glow. In the corridor, she passed a human delegate, their newest addition to the galactic community. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years prior, their entry into the cosmic stage still fresh and viewed with skepticism by older species. This particular human, Dr. Eli Reed, nodded politely as they passed. "Beautiful. A view out there, isn't it?" he remarked with casual warmth. Tala responded with the measured cadence typical of her kind. "Indeed, the stellar formations in this quadrant are particularly notable for their symmetrical patterns." What she didn't say was how the star clusters reminded her of the luminous festivals from her childhood, before she learned that her emotional sensitivity was aberrant, before the implant was placed at the base of her skull to help her regulate her condition. The conference room doors slid open to reveal representatives from the mining consortium, the Draz, reptilian beings with calculating eyes and scales that clinked softly like metal coins when they moved. Their spokesbearer, Vex, fixed her with an unblinking stare. "Ambassador Tala, we were beginning to wonder if you had reconsidered our offer." "The Luminari do not reconsider once a path has been determined," she replied smoothly, taking her designated seat. "We are prepared to discuss terms." The meeting proceeded with clinical precision, each party presenting their demands with practiced diplomacy. Yet beneath Tala's composed exterior, desperation clawed at her consciousness. The Draz terms were exploitative, demanding 90% of all resources extracted from Luminari territory. Acceptance meant survival, but at the cost of effective servitude for generations. As the negotiation continued, Tala felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes, the warning sign that her emotional control was slipping. The implant at A. Her neck pulsed, administering the chemical suppressant designed to maintain her composure. Outside the viewport, a comet streaked past, its brilliant tail momentarily illuminating the darkness. Just like her people's future, Tala thought. Bright, but fleeting unless she could somehow change their fate. Dr. Eli Reed had never intended to become a diplomat. Before the unexpected invitation to join Earth's first delegation to the Galactic Council, he had been a cultural anthropologist specializing in non-verbal communication. His groundbreaking research on emotional expression across human cultures had brought him to the attention of the United Earth government when they discovered that most galactic species communicated as much through biochemical signals and energy patterns as through words. Now, as he sat watching the Luminary ambassador during shared meals and council sessions, his training told him something was different about her. While other Luminari he had observed maintained an almost statue-like stillness, Tala exhibited micro-expressions, fleeting twitches at the corner of her mouth, momentary tensions around her eyes, that suggested emotional experiences carefully contained. "You're staring again," whispered Kai, his colleague from Earth's xenobiology department. Eli straightened in his seat. "Sorry. Professional hazard." "Well, your professional hazard is making the Draz representative nervous. They think you're forming an alliance with the Luminari." Eli snorted. "Hardly. I've barely exchanged 10 words with Ambassador Tala." Yet he couldn't deny his fascination. The Luminari were considered the most emotionally detached species in the Council, their decisions based purely on logical calculations. Share of benefit. But if his observations were correct, Tala was experiencing emotions she wasn't expressing, which raised a profound question. Were all Luminaries secretly emotional beings concealing their feelings, or was Tala unique among her kind? Later, that cycle, as artificial night descended on the vessel, Eli found himself wandering to the observation deck. He had always found comfort in stargazing, the vast cosmic perspective helping him process the cultural overwhelm of interspecies diplomacy. To his surprise, Tala was already there, her slender form silhouetted against the panoramic viewport. "I apologize for intruding," he said, preparing to retreat. "No intrusion, Dr. Reed. The observation deck is communal space." Her voice held the characteristic melodic quality of her species, but Eli detected a subtle tension underlying the words. Something was troubling her. "May I join you?" She inclined her head slightly, the Luminari equivalent of a shrug. "If you wish." For several minutes they stood in silence, watching the stars. Eli noticed how Tala's fingers periodically pressed against a small device at the base of her neck, some kind of personal technology he hadn't observed on other Luminari. "The Draz are pushing for unfavorable terms," he ventured, deciding on directness. Tala's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "You've been monitoring our negotiations?" "Not deliberately, but diplomatic vessels have thin walls and thinner secrets." He turned to face her. "Earth has experience with unbalanced resource agreements. Perhaps we could offer an alternative perspective. Why would humans involve themselves in Luminari affairs? Because sometimes an outside perspective reveals options, invisible to those closest to the problem." For the first time, Tala turned to look directly at him, her iridescent eyes catching the starlight. "What would humans gain from such involvement?" Eli smiled. "Not everything is transactional, Ambassador. Sometimes helping is simply human." Something flickered across Tala's face. Surprise, perhaps, or suspicion. Then she whispered words that confirmed Eli's suspicions about her difference. "I should warn you, Dr. Reed. Involvement with Luminari affairs rarely benefits the involved." As she moved to leave, the overhead lights briefly reflected off her skin, and Eli caught a glimpse of something extraordinary, a subtle phosphorescence, like moonlight trapped beneath glass, illuminating her from within. The Draz delegation moved with calculated precision as they cornered Tala in a secluded corridor after the 3rd day of negotiations. Their lead negotiator, Vex, towered over her, scales gleaming under the corridor lights. "Our patience wanes." "Ambassador," he hissed, consonants clicking against sharp teeth. "Your council sent you with authority to make agreements, yet you resist reasonable terms." Tala maintained perfect composure. "I was sent to negotiate favorable terms, not to surrender our sovereignty." "Favorable?" The Draz let out a rasping sound, their species equivalent of laughter. "You misunderstand your position. The Luminari need these resources to survive. We merely need them to prosper. Desperation is poor leverage, Ambassador." The truth in his words stung worse than any threat. The Luminari civilization stood at the precipice of energy collapse. Their star continued its inevitable decline, and their energy reserves had dwindled past critical thresholds. Without access to the mineral-rich asteroids in the disputed border territory, her people faced extinction within a generation. "I require additional time to consult with my council," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady as emotions surged against her. "Control. Time is as finite as your options." Vex leaned closer, his breath hot and acrid. "2 cycles, then we withdraw our offer entirely." As the Draz delegation departed, Tala felt the implant at her neck working overtime, pumping suppressants into her system to counteract the rush of fear and anger, threatening to illuminate her skin. The device had been specially designed for her condition, her inability to naturally suppress emotions like normal luminari. A shameful defect that would have seen her removed from society if not for her exceptional diplomatic abilities. She needed solitude to regain control. The observation deck would be occupied at this hour, so she retreated to her quarters, engaging the privacy protocols. Only there, safely isolated, did she permit herself to experience the full weight of her predicament. The implant could only do so much. As despair washed over her, her skin began to glow, softly at first, then with increasing brightness until the entire room was bathed in the blue-white radiance of her distress. On Lux, such a display would result in immediate sedation and psychological reconditioning. The Luminari had built their civilization on emotional suppression, believing that feelings interfered with rational thought and social harmony. Tala sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around herself as the light pulsed with her ragged breathing. Her people were dying, and their only salvation lay in a deal that would enslave them to the Draz for generations. There had to be another option, some path she hadn't considered. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Someone requesting entry. Panic surged through her. No one could see her like this, glowing with the evidence of her defect. She scrambled to increase the implant's output, watching with relief as the luminescence of her skin gradually dimmed. "One moment," she called, her voice carefully modulated. When the door slid open, Dr. Eli Reed stood in the corridor, concern evident in his expression. "Ambassador, He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening slightly. Tala realized with horror that her control wasn't complete. A faint glow still emanated from her skin, visible to the perceptive human. "Is this a bad time?" he asked quietly. "What? Do you need Dr. Reed?" Her tone came out sharper than intended. The ship's environmental sensors detected an energy fluctuation in this section. His eyes held hers, communicating understanding without words. I volunteered to investigate rather than security personnel. The implication was clear. He had protected her secret. But why? "Thank you for your discretion," she said carefully. "It was merely a standard energy conversion practice, nothing requiring attention." Eli nodded slowly. "Of course. Though if you ever wish to discuss energy conversion practices, I have some experience with unusual energy phenomena." As he turned to leave, he added softly, "Everyone has secrets, Ambassador Tala. Not all secrets need to remain burdens." Born alone. The door closed, leaving Tala staring at the empty space where he had stood, wondering if she had just found an ally or created a dangerous liability. The diplomatic vessel entered the Cygnus transit corridor, a shortcut through folded space that would deliver them to the Galactic Council's orbital station in mere hours rather than weeks. As reality warped around the ship, creating disorienting visual distortions through the viewports, most delegates retreated to their quarters to avoid the unsettling effects. Eli, however, made his way to the ship's archives. As the newest species in the galactic community, humans had been granted limited access to historical records, a gesture of inclusion that came with significant restrictions. Most files regarding member species' biological and social development were classified, available only to representatives of the species in question. But Eli had discovered a loophole. Public medical emergency protocols contained basic biological information about all council species, information necessary for emergency responders. These files weren't comprehensive, but they provided insight that might help him understand what he had witnessed in Tala's quarters. The archival interface hummed as he entered his search parameters. Luminary physiology, bioluminescence, emotional expression. The results were sparse but revealing. According to emergency guidelines, luminary emotional suppression wasn't merely cultural, but physiological. Their bodies converted emotional energy into light, a process that had once been involuntary but had evolved into a controlled biological response. Modern luminari could channel this energy into practical applications rather than expressing it as visible light. A restricted reference caught his attention. Chromatic dissonance syndrome. The file itself was inaccessible, but the emergency protocol noted that affected individuals required special handling during medical crises to prevent catastrophic energy discharge. Eli sat back, absorbing the implications. Tala wasn't just hiding her emotions. She was experiencing some kind of medical condition that made emotional control difficult. And given the Luminari cultural emphasis on emotional suppression, such a condition would likely be stigmatized. Finding our historical records fascinating, Dr. Reed, the voice startled him. Ambassador Kelvik of the Ariki, insectoid beings, known for their silent movement, had entered without him noticing. Ambassador, yes, quite enlightening. Eli casually closed the search window. Human curiosity is one of our defining traits. Curiosity is valuable when properly directed. Kelvik's mandibles clicked softly. Though involvement in matters beyond one's sphere can be hazardous, particularly regarding species whose vulnerabilities are deliberately obscured, the warning was thinly veiled. Somehow Kelvik knew what or who Eli was researching. I appreciate your concern, Eli replied carefully. Humans are still learning the nuances of interspecies diplomacy. Indeed, a process that typically requires numerous generations. Kelvik's compound eyes glinted in the low light. The Luminari negotiations affect the balance of power in this sector. Many species have interests in their outcome, including mine. After Kelvik departed, Eli remained motionless, processing this new development. The Ariki were renowned information brokers. If they were monitoring his activities, others might be as well. His interest in Tala had not gone unnoticed, which meant she might face scrutiny because of his actions. He needed to warn her, but approaching her directly might only increase suspicion. As he pondered his options, the ship's communication system chimed with an announcement. Attention all delegates. Due to unexpected gravitational interference in the Cygnus corridor, our arrival at the Council Station will be delayed by 12 hours. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Seconds later, the vessel shuddered violently. Emergency lighting flashed on as the primary systems flickered. Eli gripped the console as artificial gravity fluctuated, momentarily lifting him from his seat before slamming him back down. The gravitational interference was too convenient, too perfectly timed. Someone didn't want the Luminari delegation reaching the Council. Someone willing to endanger an entire diplomatic vessel to prevent it. As warning klaxons blared, Eli had a terrible realization. Tala's negotiations weren't just about resources. Something much larger was at stake, something worth killing for. The emergency containment field stabilized the ship's structural integrity, but damage reports flooded the command center. Captain Moores, a veteran Tellurian with skin like polished granite, dispatched repair crews with practiced efficiency. Status. A report on the delegates, she demanded. All accounted for except... The security officer paused. We're missing the Luminari ambassador. Eli, who had joined the emergency response team due to his prior emergency management experience on Earth, felt his chest tighten. Last known location? Life signs detected in the starboard observation deck, but communications are down in that section. Environmental systems report atmospheric venting in adjacent corridors. Captain Moores nodded grimly. That area took a direct hit when we passed through the gravitational distortion. It's cut off from main life support. I know a maintenance passage that connects to that section, Eli volunteered. I can reach her. The captain assessed him with ancient eyes. This wasn't a natural phenomenon, Dr. Reed. Someone targeted this vessel with a localized gravity weapon. All the more reason to retrieve the ambassador quickly. Minutes later, Eli navigated the narrow maintenance shaft, emergency breather secured over his face. The passage ended at a manual access hatch that opened into the observation deck's storage compartment. When he emerged, the scene before him confirmed his fears. The observation deck had partially depressurized. Emergency barriers had engaged, but they were failing. Microscopic cracks spreading across the transparent aluminum viewport as space pulled at the weakened structure. Tala lay unconscious near the viewport, a thin line of silvery blood trailing from her temple. More alarming was the state of her implant. The device at her neck was damaged, sparking erratically. As Eli approached, he saw her skin beginning to glow, faintly at first, then with increasing intensity as the implant's suppression function failed. Without its chemical regulators, her natural bioluminescence was emerging unchecked. "Tala!" He knelt beside her, checking her vital signs. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. When she recognized him, panic flashed across her face. "The implant, it's malfunctioning. We need to evacuate this section immediately." Eli helped her to a sitting position. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, then gasped as her skin brightened further, now illuminating the entire deck with pulsing, white-blue light. "You don't understand. Without the implant, I can't control the conversion process. The emotional energy, it's building. If I can't release it safely..." Understanding dawned on Eli. The restricted file on chromatic dissonance syndrome had mentioned catastrophic energy discharge. Tala wasn't just glowing, she was building towards some kind of energetic overload. "What happens if you can't suppress it?" he asked urgently. Pain twisted her features as the light intensified. "Think of a localized supernova." The implications were immediate and terrifying. If Tala lost control completely, the resulting energy release could destroy the ship. "There must be an alternative to suppression," Eli insisted. "Your ancestors didn't have implants. How did they manage their energy?" "They didn't suppress it," she whispered, her voice strained. "They expressed it through communal light sharing." "But I've never..." "The techniques are forbidden." An explosion rocked the ship and the cracks in the viewport expanded. The emergency barrier flickered ominously. "We don't have time for forbidden techniques to be forbidden," Eli said. "Tell me what to do." Tala's glow had reached blinding intensity. "Physical contact amplifies the connection. In ancient times, my people would join hands to share emotional energy, redistributing it harmlessly." Without hesitation, Eli grasped her glowing hands in his own. The effect was immediate and overwhelming, like touching a live wire. Energy coursed through him, carrying with it fragments of emotion. Tala's fear, her desperation to save her people, her lifetime of isolation. Tears sprang to his eyes, not from pain, but from the intensity of shared feeling. Most surprising of all, as the light engulfed them both, was the realization that flowed between them. This was what the Luminari had sacrificed for their vaunted emotional control, the profound power of genuine connection. The light connecting Tala and Eli pulsed like a living thing, spreading tendrils of luminescence throughout the observation deck. Where the energy touched damaged systems, circuitry repaired itself, the emergency barriers strengthened, cracks in the viewport sealed. It was as if the raw emotional energy had become a healing force when properly channeled. Through their joined hands, Tala experienced something she had been taught was impossible, emotional resonance with another being. The human's consciousness brushed against hers, not with the clinical detachment of luminary mental techniques, but with open warmth and acceptance that nearly overwhelmed her. Eli was experiencing her memories, the isolation of growing up defective in a society that prized emotional control above all else, the painful surgeries to implant the suppression device, her secret hope that somehow she could save her people without sacrificing their autonomy to the Draz. And she was experiencing his, a childhood spent moving between cultures as the child of humanitarian workers, his fascination with non-verbal communication, the wonder and trepidation of being selected as one of the first humans to represent Earth in galactic diplomacy. "This is how it was meant to be," she whispered, her voice carrying currents of awe. "This is what my people lost when they chose suppression over expression." The intensity of the connection was decreasing as the excess energy dissipated, distributed harmlessly throughout the ship's systems. Tala's glow dimmed to a manageable radiance, and Eli found himself able to see clearly again. "Are you all right?" he asked, still holding her hands. She nodded, looking at him with new understanding. "You cried while connected to me." "I felt what you felt," he said simply. No luminary would ever willingly share another's emotional burden. Wonder colored her voice. It is considered contamination of rational thought. Humans see it differently. We call it empathy. Eli helped her to her feet as emergency crews finally breached the sealed doors. And we've found it strengthens rather than weakens us. As medical personnel surrounded them, Tala maintained her grip on Eli's hand. The ship. Was anyone hurt? Minor injuries only, reported the chief medical officer. A Veston with translucent skin. Though engineering is baffled by the sudden restoration of systems in this section, by all physics this entire deck should have decompressed. Eli and Tala exchanged a look, but said nothing. Hours later, after being cleared by medical, they sat in a secure conference room with Captain Moores and the security chief. The gravitational weapon signature has been identified, announced the captain. It matches Draz military technology. That's impossible, Tala objected. The Draz need this treaty as much as the Luminari. Attacking a diplomatic vessel would delay your arrival at the council, interrupted Eli, buying them time to approach other Luminari representatives who might accept less favorable terms. The security chief nodded. We've intercepted communications suggesting exactly that. A secondary Draz delegation has approached your homeworld directly, Ambassador, claiming you were killed in a tragic accident. Tala's skin dimmed to an ashen grey. Without her implant, her emotional responses were visible for all to see. They sought to replace me with a more pliable negotiator. There's more, said Captain Moores grimly. The Draz aren't acting alone. They've formed a consortium with the Ariki and 3 other species. They're planning to carve up not just the disputed territory, but all Luminari space once your civilization collapses. Which is why, added Eli, we need to present the evidence at the council, not just of the attack, but of the conspiracy. Tala's expression hardened with resolve, her skin brightening with determination. My people have made many mistakes in our pursuit of perfect rationality, but we are not without resources. With proof of Draz aggression, we can secure emergency assistance from neutral council members. And Eli added carefully, perhaps share what we discovered about the true nature of Luminari energy conversion. Tala met his gaze, understanding the implication. Her people's emotional suppression wasn't just a cultural choice. It was a deliberate denial of their true nature and greatest power. One revelation at a time, Dr. Reed, she said softly. First, we save my people from extinction. Then, perhaps, we can help them remember what it means to truly live. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with tense anticipation as delegations from across the known universe convened for the emergency session. The hemispherical hall, designed to accommodate beings of all physiologies, featured concentric rings, serve platforms floating at various heights and atmospheric conditions. Tala stood at the speaker's position, her skin glowing faintly, evidence of her broken implant and her decision not to seek immediate replacement. Beside her, Eli represented Earth's interests, though his presence was primarily supportive. As the newest council species, humans held observer status only. Delegates of the Galactic Council, Tala began, her voice carrying through the universal. Translators, I bring before you evidence of an unprecedented violation of diplomatic protocols and an attempted mass extinction event. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Tala presented the evidence. The gravitational weapon signature, the intercepted communications, the conspiracy to divide Luminari space among the conspirators once their civilization collapsed. The Draz delegation hissed with outrage. These accusations are fabrications, declared Vex, scales bristling. The humans have manipulated evidence to increase their standing with the Council. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent security agencies, countered Captain Moores, who had accompanied them to testify. The attack signature is unmistakably of Draz origin. For 4 hours, arguments and counter-arguments flowed through the chamber. The Ariki denied involvement despite damning communications logs. The Draz claimed the weapon signature had been falsified. Political alliances shifted visibly. A species calculated their positions based on self-interest rather than justice. Eli watched with growing dismay. The Council's bureaucratic nature was grinding truth into political expediency. Without a dramatic intervention, the conspiracy might escape consequence. During a brief recess, he pulled Tala aside. They're going to bury this in committees and investigations. Your people don't have time for that." Tala nodded, her glow pulsing with frustrated agreement. "The Luminary homeworld has resources for perhaps 20 standard rotations before critical systems begin failing. The Council's recommended investigative timeline is 60 rotations. Then we need to show them what's at stake." Eli hesitated, then pressed forward. "When we connected on the ship, when I experienced your emotions directly, I understood the Luminary crisis in a way no report could convey. What if you could share that understanding with the entire Council?" Tala's eyes widened. "What you're suggesting is forbidden. The ancient techniques of mass emotional sharing haven't been practiced in centuries. Your implant is already offline, and technically, the prohibition is a Luminary law, not a Council regulation." A slow, radiant smile spread across Tala's face, the first true smile Eli had seen from her. "Dr. Reed, I believe you would have made an exceptional Luminary diplomat in another life." When the session resumed, Tala approached the central speaking platform with new purpose. As the chamber quieted, she began not with words but with action. Her skin brightened steadily until she stood as a figure of pure light at the heart of the assembly. "Honorable delegates," she said, her voice resonating with unusual depth, "I have presented evidence, statistics, and logical arguments. Now I offer something rarely shared outside my world, truth directly experienced." Before the startled security officers could intervene, Tala raised her arms. The light emanating from her skin expanded outward in a controlled wave, washing over the nearest delegates, then the next ring, and the next, until the entire chamber was bathed in luminescence. Unlike the raw energy exchange she had shared with Eli, this was a refined, targeted sharing, not of her personal emotions, but of her people's collective experience. The slow death of their star, the growing cold on their homeworld, the desperation as resources dwindled, and most powerfully, the hope that galactic cooperation might save them from extinction. When the light receded, the chamber remained silent for several heartbeats. Then one by one delegates began to speak, not with political calculation, but with genuine understanding. "We will provide emergency energy resources," announced the Terran delegate. "The Volari offer temporary relocation for vulnerable populations," said another. As commitments flowed from around the chamber, Eli caught Tala's eye. In that moment of connection, they both recognized that something fundamental had changed, not just for the Luminary, but perhaps for the entire Council. Sometimes, to be truly understood, one must be truly seen. And sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us who we really are. One standard year later, Tala stood on the newly constructed observation platform overlooking the Luminary homeworld. The massive energy collectors gifted by the Volari glinted in the weak sunlight, harvesting the dying star's remaining radiation with unprecedented efficiency. Below, construction crews from 6 allied species worked alongside Luminary engineers to build sustainable habitation centers designed to function for millennia despite the cooling climate. "Quite a view," said Eli, joining her at the railing. "Hard to believe it's the same planet I first saw in your memories." Tala smiled, her skin glowing softly with pleasure at his presence. After the council session that had saved her civilization, Eli had accepted a permanent position as Earth's cultural liaison to Lux, the first human to live among the Luminary. "The physical changes are impressive," she agreed, "but the cultural transformation is what truly amazes me." Across the capital city, evidence of that transformation was visible everywhere. Young Luminary walked openly with their skin glowing in modulated patterns, expressing emotions that had been suppressed for generations. Ancient art forms based on emotional light sharing had been revived, with performances now attracting audiences from across the galaxy. Most significantly, the Luminary Genetic Council had officially reclassified chromatic dissonance syndrome from dangerous mutation to ancestral expression, acknowledging that emotional sensitivity was not a defect but a connection to their species' true nature. "The educational exchange program has received more applications than we can process," Eli reported, referring to the initiative bringing human emotional intelligence experts to Lux while sending Luminary energy specialists to Earth. Your people are surprisingly quick to adapt. We spent centuries convincing ourselves that logic without emotion was the path to advancement, Tala replied. But logic merely offers options. Emotion gives us reason to choose between them. Without passion, we had forgotten why survival matters. A small group of luminary children ran past, their skin flickering with multicolored lights as they laughed, an expression that would have resulted in medical intervention just 1 year earlier. "Have you received word from the council regarding the Draz?" Eli asked, his expression sobering. Tala nodded. "Their trading privileges have been restricted for 10 cycles, and they've been required to pay substantial reparations. More importantly, the attempted genocide has damaged their standing with potential allies. They're isolated now." "Justice?" "Of a sort." "Justice enough. I prefer focusing on rebuilding rather than retribution." As twilight descended, lights began appearing across the city. Not just functional illumination, but expressive glowing from thousands of luminari engaged in the evening emotional harmonizing that had become their new social ritual. "Will you join tonight's sharing?" Eli asked. Tala extended her hand toward him. "Only if you participate." Though humans couldn't generate bioluminescence, they had discovered that the emotional resonance itself was accessible. Through practices similar to Earth's meditation techniques, humans like Eli could join the sharing circles, experiencing the collective emotional consciousness that the luminari were rediscovering. "I wouldn't miss it," he said, taking her glowing hand in his. As they made their way toward the central plaza where hundreds had already gathered, Tala reflected on the chain of events that had transformed her world. Had the Draz not attempted to force unfavorable terms, had the ship not been attacked, had Eli not been there when her implant failed, her people might still be trapped in their self-imposed emotional isolation, slowly dying with their son. Instead, they had found not just survival but revival, a reconnection with their emotional nature that had opened pathways to innovations their logical minds had never conceived. In the center of the plaza, the ancient light-sharing began. Hundreds of luminari joined hands, their individual glows merging into patterns of breathtaking complexity, visible manifestations of their collective emotional experience. Eli and a handful of other non-luminary visitors formed their own circle within the larger gathering, experiencing the resonance in their own way. As the harmonizing reached its peak, Tala's glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with those around her. For the first time in centuries, her people were truly seeing each other, their fears, their hopes, their love for their world and each other, and it had begun because a human had been willing to cry with her. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes salvation requires not just technological solution, but emotional revolution. And sometimes to save an entire civilization, all it takes is a single tear shared in genuine empathy across the stars.